So in the video before this, we did the first two lines of Bach Chorale BWV 17.7. And in this one, we're going to finish it. Analysis of chords, keys, figured bass, cadences, that kind of stuff. But this is very different in the second half because Bach is constantly subverting our expectations. So in terms of a methodology, if you know how to read your notes, spell your chords, recognize your cadences, and then know what key you're in, and then you know chord progression, you can usually figure out the cadence and then say, well, that means I'm in this key, and that allows you to know what context to analyze these chords. And sometimes it can start off in a key, but then it changes. And sometimes it can also give you accidentals, like in the first part here, we get the E sharp, which tells us we're in the relative minor here. And then F sharp minor is home. But when the cadence stays in this case, the key of A, then you realize that these are secondary dominant chords and we're not in a different key. Whereas on this phrase here, we end up in F sharp minor, and this is actually a change to the key of F sharp minor, as opposed to just a secondary local tonicization. In this part here, we'll still do the same thing. We'll look at the cadences, it gives us context for things, but what we're going to find is that it's not quite that simple because Bach is subverting our expectations again and again and again. So we'll have to be creative and also really thoughtful about the sounds that we're hearing in this to help us understand how to interpret some of these cadences and keys. Let's just get started right away. If we know that we're in the key of A major to start with, then F sharp minor is relative minor, E major is the dominant, C sharp minor is that relative minor, and D major is the subdominant, and B minor, sorry, I guess, would be the relative minor to that. These are the keys that we want to play in, and we've seen that already work out. So by the time we get to the second line, we're in F sharp minor, and then at the end of the line, we're in E major. We have a perfect authentic cadence right there. And that's the context from which we're doing here. I'm going to just ignore the lines right now. We're just going to look at the cadences right now. Here's a D, D, F sharp, A, and here's an A7, A, right? C sharp, E, G, natural. And so this would suggest that we're in the key of D major right there, which is great, okay? And this would be a 1, and this would be a 5-7 right there, okay? And because this is root and this is root, but this is not root, this is an imperfect authentic cadence, okay? Let's just get all of these done right away, okay? So we'll talk about voice leading because that's one of the ways that he subverts our expectations, okay? When we get back to this phrase. Here, I've got a B, a D sharp, and a B, which says I'm B major, okay? Which is, well, it could be a 5 chord, I guess. If I were in the key of E, then I would be half cadence, okay? But B major is not a closely related key. And also, see these A sharps right here, they're telling us that we're actually in the key of B, that we're pushing towards there. So this is kind of crazy. We have a 1 chord, and we have a B, right? And, a B, F sharp, E. There's my A sharp comes down here, so it's really F sharp, A, C sharp, E. This is like a passing tone right there. So this is a F sharp 7 chord. That's a B major chord right there. I'm really not liking this pen. Maybe we'll switch to pencil here in a second. But that would be like a 5-7. But you have to say, like, what's going on with that? It's not a key that we should be in. Yeah, we're switching to pencil that's nearby. Sorry. Okay, so that's kind of a weird thing. Then we get back to here, and we have a D, F sharp, D, A, and you kind of go, well, so is this still in the key of D? It might be, right? But we have all these G naturals right here, right? And so what we have is a C sharp, right? And E and a G, and then a B. And then this comes down, and we lose the B, but we still get C sharp, E, E, and G. So this is a C sharp diminished chord ending up on a D major chord, and that feels like 7, maybe if you want there's a half diminished 7. going to my 1 right there, and I'm in D, and this is an IAC in D again, right? At least that's what it seems like it should be, right? Just looking at the cadences. Here, we have an E, G sharp, B, and an E, right? So this is my B, D sharp, F sharp. This is like a suspension that's come through here. But B, B, D sharp, F sharp, A. This is a B7 chord going to an E chord. It's pretty clear that this is a 5-7 going to a 1, and this is a PAC. Perfect, because root position, and root on top here in E. That's fine. That makes perfect sense. Okay. Here, on this one, we end up on the E again, G sharp, E, and A. Now, again, if we're in the key of A, it's a half cadence, and if we're in the key of E still, then it's an authentic cadence. And so we kind of have to look here again. And this is really weird, though. We have a D, and a D, and a B, and an F sharp, and an A, if you want to include that. But right here as it stands, we have a B, D, F sharp. This is B minor, okay? So, and then it becomes, with the sharp right there, and these things holding through, this is like, well, D sharp, and then we've got a C sharp holding over, but it could be an anticipation, right? Because when I play this all right here, it just feels like that's my B minor, right? And then as these things continue on to here, right? This becomes like a D sharp leading tone into the E, right? And so, you know, is it just become a B7? But then there's a C sharp instead of a B, right? And, you know, the F sharp has gone away, although that's not quite so clear. And then we have our E chord there. So, you know, what do we make of this? Are we in the key of A and this is a half cadence? Or does this make us really feel like this is some kind of authentic cadence, like an IAC in E, right? You see that the cadences themselves, let alone the music that comes around them, is obscuring what its function is. And we'll have to get into that and listen to it. And sometimes, because Bach is consistent with himself, we'll see the same trick played again and again and again. I guess what I'm saying is I would never assign 17-7, at least the back half, as an assignment to first or second year students, unless the second year students have had a lot of experience and are doing well, or we're looking for some very specific mechanics that are in here, just as examples, but I wouldn't throw you loose on this. Anyhow, we expect this to come back to the key of A at the end, because we started in A, we're going to end in A. We have E, E, this is the A, C sharp, so this is my 1-6-4, and then these come down, it becomes a 5-7, and this is a 1 right here in A, and it's a PAC, right? So that helps. It just gets sticky in the middle here, you know. So let's try this out for a minute. Okay, now we're gonna look at chords, and then we'll try and give some reasons, or at least some good explanations of theoretically why or what chord progressions we have here. So we ended this section with a 2-6-5, 5-7-1. It's very, I mean, it sounds very normal, right? So we have this sort of, right to there, right? There. Nice, perfect authentic cadence. Now we're gonna come over to here. And our ears are in the key of E, but we know we're ending in a D chord here, right? And you're looking here, and that D sharp that was to begin with up here, showing us that we're leading to the key of E, has gone missing. So we're not going to be in the key of E for very long. But off of this chord right here, right? The next chord here is a C sharp, right? Minor. C sharp, E, G sharp. And it sounds like we've just dipped down to the relative minor, right? Or it's a 6th chord, right? And then that goes to an F sharp chord right there. So it goes from that to here, F sharp, like that, right? And then to a D, and then to an E, right? Which is kind of strange. And then we get, well, C sharp diminished, right? Or C sharp minor, sorry. And then we head into an A chord. And that's to there, okay? So far, there's nothing to suggest a key of D. It's kind of funny. So let's make sense of this as though we're in the key of E or C sharp minor, which is the relative. Well, it's probably not going to be E because there's no D sharp. So we could either say we've pivoted back to the key of F sharp minor, which has been really important in the early phrases, and is which this would be a minor 5, right, going to a 1. And that might be okay. We're going to analyze it a couple different ways and show you that this can be, you have to try some things out, okay? Neighbor tone, right? The D chord in the key of F sharp minor would be my 6, right? And then this becomes the E, which would be my subtonic 7, right? Passing tones. This is a C sharp chord, which would be, again, my minor 5, because we don't have an E sharp leading us to the F, right? And then this is an A chord. I'll put these in here. This is F sharp minor, right? This is D. This is E. This is C sharp minor, right? And then this is A, okay? And then the A would be my 3, like that, okay? It's fine. But if we're in the key of F sharp, we'd sure like to see some E sharp leading tones like we did at the beginning. Sort of a way of him saying, nah, I don't think so. Unless you think he's playing a modal game, which he might be, right? The other possibility, again, since it doesn't feel like we're in E truly because we don't have a D sharp leading us into that, is to say, well, what if I'm in the key of C sharp? What if I jump to the key of C sharp minor? Okay, in that case, that would be a 1 chord, right? And then this would be a 4 chord, right? And this would be my Neapolitan chord, right there, Neapolitan 6, right? Which is a major triad on flat 2. It doesn't have the natural sign here because it was never in the key signature to begin with, but that's what that would be, right? And then this would be my 3 chord, right there, right? And this would be my 1 chord, and then this would be my, oh, if I'm in C sharp, this would be my 6 chord, right? That's a possibility, okay? The third possibility is I've shifted back, or I'm shifting back to the key of A. In some ways, I feel like that's not a bad decision either. I'm gonna grab a different colored pen so it's easier to see. Okay, so if I'm in the key of A, right, because we're ending up here as an A, then this would be my, I'm going to pretend I'm in the key of E minor, so that'd be my 6, right, or sorry, E would equal my 3, right, and then if I'm in A, this is my 6, right, and then D would be my 4, this is making a little more sense, this would be 5, right? And then if you ignore the C sharp, which I think is actually a good choice, and think of it as an anticipation, because this is still E, E, G sharp, then this is still an E chord going all the way through, and maybe we don't have to think about that as a C sharp minor at all. We can just think of it as the E chord that's been extended, right? And then I go to 1. And in some ways, in my ears, that makes the most sense, especially given the cadence. And we're going to talk about the cadence now. So here I'm in my key of A. Now we had to try out all the different ones to come up with the one that makes the most sense. In some ways though, what do we hear? And your answer is maybe you don't hear anything. So I'm going to play from right there. So there's my 4 chord in the key of E, right there. Right, and there's my 2, and there's my 5, and there's my cadence right there. Okay? Now, it still feels like we're relative to the E because it's a C sharp minor chord, right? And it continues on, and so you can say, okay, 6 to 2, right? But when we get to this D chord without any sharps in it, our ears think something's weird here. If you want to think you're in the key of the relative minor, it's a Neapolitan. That's why it sounds weird. If you want to think of yourself in the key of A, we're pivoting back, then that's why it's the 4 chord right there, right? And then we get affirmation of that because we have an E, right? And I still feel like this thing here, I know this is messing up, but it's still this underneath, right? And then we get to our 1 chord right there. And that's what it kind of feels like to me when I play it through. However, we still have to account for this D here. This A turns into an A7, which is a 5, 7, a 4, right? Going to a 4. The problem is that we don't have a cadence that ends on 4. Doesn't make sense to us in our ears. This sounds like a 5 going to a 1. So we are in the key of D at the end. How would I explain this in my class? I would say that Bach is playing with us. It does probably feel like it's going back to A very quickly after being in the key of E. That's the most normal thing in our ears as well. But then at the very end, he takes a detour. Like this should have gone 1, A, and then to a, like should have gone to an E chord. It should have been a half cadence there. Instead he goes A7, changes the key signature right there and goes to a D. And I'd call this a non-standard or a less common, what would we call it, deceptive cadence. A deceptive cadence is typically defined as 1, or a weird plagal cadence maybe, or something like that. But a deceptive cadence is usually defined by textbooks like Koska as anything that has a leading tone and expects to go to 1 and then takes you somewhere else, 6 being the most common. And sure, fine. But if we get to here, and we're on our E chord right there, so we hear this 5, 6, right, passing notes, and then with the C sharp giving us a little more dissonance, but then we get to hear, what we want to hear is this, and then to like an E minor chord or E major like that. But instead what it does, starting here, is it gives us this, and it says surprise. That's definitely a 5, 7 chord there. So it's either the very quickest modulation, because it goes away from there right after that, or it's a deceptive cadence. Maybe it's both. Like I said, this is an ugly one to analyze. For sake of our technique, I think we're in the key of D, right? I think that's what happened. We were in A, we went and pushed ourselves from A into F sharp minor, and then we pushed ourselves into E, and we're there, but by the time we get out of it, now we're in D, E, and C sharp, right? Minor, that area, and then it pushes out briefly into A, and says, surprise, we're actually in the key of D. And that's going to actually explain what happens next year. So, we're in D, or we're in the 2 sharps section, right there. Okay, got the G natural. And that sort of continues on. We have the G natural there as well. But the A sharp also tells us that maybe instead of being in the key of D, we're in the key of B minor, right? So now let's just track this for a minute. I know this was B major at the end, but we know that Bach has a habit, as many composers from that time period, if you're in the minor, to finish your piece, like if this was an A minor, we'd finish with an A major chord here. It's a Picardy third, it's modal borrowing. And that's kind of what's going on here. If we try and analyze this in the key of D, it gets confusing pretty quickly. We'll do that. And if we try and analyze it in the key of B major, then we end up getting all these modal substitution where it's like, well, this is the modally borrowed 6 and stuff like that. But if we just say, look, we cadenced into D, just like we did right there, and we went 5, 7 of 4 going to 4, 5, 7 of 4 equals 5, because that's what it sounds like going to 1. And then if we say, now we're in, not in D, but in B minor, which is the playground we want to play in, just like you did both of these at the same time, all of this will make sense. And then we just did a Picardy third, or a modally borrowed 1 chord right there. So I gave away the answer. We're just gonna do this. Okay, so this is still an A chord right here, right? So we're going to call this a 5 chord because it feels like the 5 coming off of here, right? If we do this chord right here, like that, to here, right? Then the next chord, which is also an A chord, although it's inverted, still feels like a, you know, it's in the key, right? All right. But then we get a B minor chord, which would be a 6 chord in the key of D. And here's where I think 6 equals 1, where we switch into B minor, okay? All right, now let's go from there. If I'm in the key of B minor, this is a G chord, G natural, B, D, right? This is G right here. That becomes my 6, right? This C sharp, E, and G right there becomes my 2 chord, diminished, right? You can call that a 7 or a 5, wandering in there if you want to, because it does have that flavor of it from a passing chord point of view, right? But then I have another 2 chord right here, right? Sorry, 6 chord right here, right? So you can go like 2, 5, and then deceptive progression to there, right? And here's another 6 chord, G, B, D, passing tone. And then I have my 5, 7, and this is just a 1 chord, but it's modally borrowed. And that's how that sounds to me. Have a listen from here, right? I have my A chord right there. It sounds like a 5, right? Let me find it over here on the piano, sort of looking sideways. And then it says, but then listen to this, right? Right? Or, sorry. There we go. Right? And, not a G sharp, sorry, F sharp. There we go. And then this G natural chord sounds like I'm in the minor, right? And then here's my C sharp chord, 2. This is my pseudo 5. And then I go back to my G natural chord, so it's a deceptive progression. And then I get my full-on 5 chord. And then I come to here. And instead of this, I get major, because he borrowed that. Okay? It's tricky. It's wonderful. Okay? So, if you think about it, he basically said, look, I'm in E and C sharp minor, and now I'm in D and then B minor. So those are our areas, right? Okay. Then what happens? Well, it looks like we're still in D, right? Because there's a D chord, right? And this is a C sharp chord. Let's just check out some of these chords here. This is E, E G sharp, E B, right? This is A, right? It's passing tone. This is F sharp minor, right? This is B minor. This is G, right? And then we have C sharp diminished right there, right? Or half diminished. So let's think about this again then. If I'm in the key of B minor, right? Then this would be a 4 chord in the wrong quality. But if you think of it in B major, he's playing it both ways now. Then this would be my 4. Or maybe he's just picked up and said, you know what, I think I'm back in the key of A, because this would be a 5, and this would be a 1, and this would be a 6, right? And I think that's probably our, what it sounds like is what it sounds like, right? This is going to sound like 5, 1, 6, and then this is a B minor chord here, right? So that's going to be my 2, right? And then this is a weird one right there. That's like subtonic 7, which doesn't make any sense. And then that goes to C sharp, which would be my 3, which again doesn't make any sense. So I think what's going to happen here is that we're going to call, right, your B chord here. It's not, sorry, it's not diminished, just 2 is going to equal 6 in my new key. And then this is going to be 4, and this is going to take me to 7, which then takes me to there. So when I start here, you're going to hear 5-1 sound, right? Like this. 5-1 or 1-4 if you want to, but then I think this whole stuff afterwards to there, right? And then the D on top without the D sharp really makes me feel like I'm in the key of A, right? Okay. And then, let's see, where am I? And G natural. That's my subtonic 7, which makes no sense, right? It's telling me I'm back in the key of D, right? 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 And then here. Yeah. Okay. And then let's push onward from here. This is my 5 chord because I'm in the key of D. That's an A chord. And then this tells me I've gone to the key of E, right? You can see that this is a D sharp, B, D sharp, F sharp, F sharp. It's a B chord with a 7 if you want right there. So this is going to be in the key of E, like we're looking at right here. That's going to be my 5, 6, 5, going to my 1. This is an A major chord here, which would be my 4, right? And then 5, 1. That means that your D and then your A, right, which would have been your 5, becomes your 4 for your new key, going to the key of E, right there. All right, almost out of the woods. We still have to deal with this. I recognize that this is just way more difficult and involved than the first one, which seems straightforward. It's part of the reason why we broke this up into 2, but hopefully you're finding good things in here. And I'm not going to get too far into it, but if you had felt like you were strongly in the key of F sharp minor up here from the first video, finding all these G naturals, although we're legitimately in a different key, does have a Neapolitan feel about it, just like we felt like this was kind of a Neapolitan sound, depending on how you interpreted it there. I think that Bach is trying to get away with that in a bunch of different ways too. All right, we know we're going to be probably in E, right? Because this is a B7 right here, right? But let's take a look at our chords here, right? This is a C sharp minor, right? This is an F sharp minor. This pulls us to there and kind of says like I'm a D sharp diminished 7 chord if you take this and these notes right there, right? Or D sharp chord, right? Diminished, which takes me to my E, right? Here I have a B7, right? And then I have another C sharp minor. And then I have a B minor, which then becomes B7. That's kind of weird and interesting. Okay. Let's take a look at how it sounds. It sounds really similar to this. If you look, we're going from C sharp to F, but then it changes up here a little bit. Okay. So we still have key of E cadence right there, like we did before, right? And then he starts up the same way here as well, and he says, let's do the same thing again. So he's playing with our expectations, right? And here again, but then there, right? So he's taking us to E, and then the B7 that comes after it really solidifies, right? But then this would be what we'd call a, so if we think of ourselves in the key of E, then this is 6, going to 2, going to 1, but this is by means of a 7 diminished right there, 7 diminished 6, which is why 2 will go to 1, because there's a dominant type chord right there. And then this is my 5, 7, and this is a, there we go, like that, right? So then we have to ask ourselves, like, what's going on with that, right? Let's play it and just see what it sounds like to us. So we go, let's kick back to here, B7, right? Which reaffirms the key we're in, right? 6 chord, and then we get this interesting sound here, right? Right? Well, how does that fit exactly? If I'm in the key of A, then this makes perfect sense. If I'm in the key of E, then this is a problem. It's like a modally borrowed 5. It doesn't make any sense, right? And here again, I think Bach is just playing it both ways. This progression makes perfect sense in the key of E, right? And we just have to deal with this and call it like a modally borrowed 4, right? Or 5, sorry. Modally borrowed 5. But that's a really kind of weird thing, and then it changes into this right here. I still think that's the correct thing. If you listen to all of this, it just sounds like it, makes sense. Like we dip into the relative minor, but we come back, this reaffirms this, and then there's this right here. Why? What's that about? And I think what's happening is he's shaking our faith in the key of E right there. It's gonna be E, because we have this B7 chord coming to there. I mean, this is a non-chord tone, right? But by putting the B minor chord here, it's like enough of a sonic doubt that we can have an easier time sort of like going back to the key of A. He's saying like, yeah, we're in the key of E, but don't forget, I'm actually supposed to be going back into the key of A. Or you can just call it a modal borrowed 5. I hear it as both. But the chord progression makes sense this way, and then we explain this as a modally borrowed 5, right? That changes back into where it needs to be. However, the rationale for that is because this is reminding us and foreshadowing that we're really in the key of A. So I think this is like a, you know, an I, A, C, and E with an asterisk that it's got a disease from the key of A coming back right there, right? And then if we look here, this is my F sharp, sorry, C sharp, E sharp, G. This is like a C sharp major chord, right? Which then goes to a F sharp, A, D, right? And then here is my, let's see, E, G sharp, B, D. It's an E7 chord, right? And this goes to my A. So we're really coming back quickly, right? Right? To E7, like this is reestablished that we're in the key of 5-1, 5. And this will be a 6 chord right here. This is my F sharp chord, minor right there. And then here is my final cadence predominant chord here, which is going to be a B, D, F sharp, and the A is really a non-chord tone, but that would still be a B minor chord, right, from there, right? So that's my 2, 6. Let's go backwards. This is my 6, nice circle of fifths. This is my 5, 7, which we've done this sort of progression before, where we had deceptive progression. Here's my 1. Here's my 5, 6, 5. Here's my 4. That's kind of crazy, right? But what he's doing is he's saying this is the 5, 6 of 6, but then he's going to a 4 instead, which is sort of a deceptive progression, right? They do sort of pseudo sub for each other. And that's it right there. There's one other thing that I alluded to right here back at the beginning about subverting our expectations, and it happens more than once. And I also want to point this out as well, because we're so focused on harmony that we forget about lines. If we did this line right here, right, and we're going to D, right, we're in the key of D, then that C sharp right there is T do. Ti la ti do is what it should do. And we've been taught in our textbooks that when you have T in an upper voice, unless it's doing some kind of sequence or something like that, which is not functioning as T, then it needs to resolve upwards. And he does the cardinal sin. He's got root, 7th, 5th right there, and then 3rd above, T, right? 7, like third of the chord, but 7 in the key, should go to here. And so he really subverts our expectations. Like if I play this for you correctly and voice it correctly, I get this A chord right here, and then I go to the 5/7 version of it, it should come to here. But he doesn't, he goes right, and then this. It's like, nope, you don't get it yet. He's playing with us, right? So he doesn't want to say key of D very long because he wants to go to the key of, right? And you think he's going to do it here, but then he says, oh, but 6 chord instead of 1 chord, right? And then he does the same thing here again. It's not quite as egregious because it's not T, but if I look at this chord right here, if I play from here, I guess, right? And I go, and I get my G chord, and I get my C sharp chord right here, right? And it comes down. It should come up to here, right? The line's rising up, but instead he goes, I'll play from the C sharp chord right here. He plays here and he goes like this. And then he just comes down to here. Breaks the line completely, right? That's really important to recognize that every one of his lines is a failed melody until he gets to the end, where he says, okay, we're figuring things out. So he undercuts us with the B natural chord or B minor chord there, right? And then comes down to here, right? And then from there, it does what it's supposed to do. And you'll hear, I'm just going to play this last little bit here for you, so you can hear this let's play the last 2 measures, I guess, right? So it's like, and then you get this, in a proper normal cadence that we're used to. And it goes re, do. So he's building up sort of like sneezes that don't happen, or characters that don't end up with who they're supposed to end up, and your romantic notions of the storyline are thwarted again and again and again. These are super important voice leading rules that he's breaking right here, and that's part of his game. Very complicated compared to much of what's going on in previous chorales. So I think in some ways 17-7 is special. Yeah, even the fact that he's playing both keys at the same time, like he gets to the key of E and then he plays in the C sharp minor before he pivots to the next key, and then instead of being in the key of D for very long, he pivots in the same moment into the key of B minor, right? And so he's playing in both of these keys at the same time, as opposed to one and then the next and then the next. And then Hickory third really throws us for a loop, because then this feels like a 5-1 from there to there, right? Because this leads to the E, but then this is really 5 of the A right there. And then he says, I'm just kidding, we're actually just going to go to D again right now. So it's like he pushed hard to get to F sharp, right, by going to the 6th chord right away, the relative minor, and then having secondary dominance here, but not cadencing in the key, and then finally goes to the new key. And now when he's pushing backwards through these things, he's pushing hard, but not making progress right away. It's a struggle to get us there, and the thwarting of expectations. Okay, well, this is more than double the length of the first video. Thank you if you watched all the way through. Hopefully you found some things that were useful in there, or at least kind of go like, wow, it's great when we can apply our technique but are still challenged by the expectations that come out of it. That's it for now. See you later.